Nuts dies for Elizabeth Craft Designs, and today I'll be teaching a tutorial on this. How to make an Expanding Trees Ring Accordion card and to style William the Goat as an elf. This is my project for the October 2015 Designer Challenge. Now our theme this month is transformations of the characters. It's called Characters in Costume. I'm going to make William into a little elf, and there are just lots of great ideas by the team on the Elizabeth Craft Designs blog. Make sure you check out the link in the About section below this YouTube video. So I'm going to cut a lot of my elf pieces at once. I've got William the Goat, his detail layer and his eyes. I've got a green flourish from the Agatha edges. I have a red bottom part of a Christmas tree for his elf hat, and then his little pink nose. And then I cut some additional pieces after this. I've got a black shadow layer for William. I cut the top of his head again to get the pink parts of his ears, 2 solid green Christmas trees, and the detail layer in his middle part out of green. I'll use a light blue Copic marker to color his eyeballs, and then I'm also going to use a dark red Copic marker to make stripes on his legs. Okay, the Elizabeth Craft Designs detail scissors can be so helpful for this. What I'm going to do is going to start altering William the Goat. So the first alteration I'm going to make is I'm going to make his ears just a little bit more pointed. So this is just a small little shave off the side of his ears to just kind of point them up a little bit. My next alteration is actually to cut his head off. So sorry, William. I'm going to use my detail scissors for that. Now I've added double-sided adhesive to the back of the cardstock colors before die cutting, so that makes it really easy to add the head to the shadow layer. I can just line it up right where it's supposed to go and put that right on. The detail tweezers are another tool I just couldn't live without. The way the character eyeballs work is they have a little oval cutout. If you spin that eyeball around until the oval looks like an oval, then that's the way that the character is going to look the most straight ahead forward. But of course you can alter their expressions by just simply spinning the eyeballs into new positions. I'm also going to peel up the little inside parts of his ear. I cut that little top part of his head out of a pink color just to have those little pink sections for the ears. And then the other thing that I cut out of pink is his little nose piece. So that's a separate little die. I just cut it out of pink. I'll sink it right there in the middle. I can get William's collar out of the part of his body that's going to be covered by the green costume. So I can just take my detail scissors in there and cut a little zigzag portion right below his head, and that can be his collar for later. And then the rest of his body can just go right onto the shadow layer like normal. And then speaking of his little body part that I cut out of the green cardstock, all I'm doing is just kind of notching the areas at the top of his legs just so it kind of has that little fringe look at the bottom of the costume. And I did that at the tail as well. And then before I put the collar on it, I'm going to take my Copic marker and just kind of line the edges. And that's self-adhesive, that little collar piece, so I can just place that in position. The flourish die that comes with the Agatha edges is just perfect for making little elf shoes. And there's 4 of these little swirls on each Agatha edge, so you really only have to cut it one time to get all 4 shoes. Just make sure that you grab the little center piece that comes out of that flourish and sink it back in there. It might also look nice if you switched the color and did the little inlay in a different color. Now one thing about his leg is you'll need to cut up there with your detail scissors to get that leg to come up. That way you can tuck the shoe behind the other legs. So when I put that 3rd shoe on, then most of his foot will be tucked behind his leg. Now since I was using the Christmas trees dies for this project, it was a great way to make myself a little elf hat. So all I did is just cut 2 of the solid trees, lined them up and held them next to each other in the same position, while I use the scissors to just cut off the sides of the tree so that it becomes more of just a pointed, well, really almost like a dunce cap, but with a fun scalloped edge at the bottom. And the reason I needed 2 of them is the way that I was going to add a jingle bell on top was by using this little jingle bell brad. And so my idea was that I could sink the brad prongs down into the adhesive and then put another hat over the top, and then the prongs would be sandwiched between the 2 hats, and then it would, end up at the top like a jingle bell hat. And then I did cut that extra little piece of red from one of the Christmas trees to be able to make that little red stripe. And then I'm just going to attach that right to the top of William's head. And I must say, William the Goat makes an adorable elf. Okay, he needs to go on a project, so let's make a Ring Accordion album. Okay, so the technique I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the Christmas trees into the Ring Accordion so that they can open. So this is a technique I wanted to teach. The Christmas Trees Pop Stand makes a really cool 3-dimensional tree. It also works on the accordion albums. You could just do this with any of the accordion albums. The first step is to go ahead and cut your page. So I'm going to use the Ring Accordion. I'm going to cut a page out of green cardstock. Basically, I'm just making a complete duplicate of the one that I've already finished, and I'll just walk you through that step by step. So step one is just to cut the page out of whatever color cardstock you want. And then now I need to emboss the Christmas tree die into that page so that I know where to line it up later. So I'm going to use some temporary removable tape, and I'm going to line that tree up just perfectly over the center. You can see it's centered top to bottom, centered in the middle as well. Definitely don't want to cut this. It would make my page fall apart. What I want to do is I want to emboss it. So I need to switch my sandwich in my Sizzix Big Shot. So that means I'm going to go down to tab 1. And then for a Sizzix Big Shot, the pieces that you need for embossing are your impressions pad, that's hard, and then you want the silicone rubber, and that's soft. Those two get used as a set, and you do not use a cutting pad on the bottom, you use that set. Then your paper with your die over the top, and then a cutting pad, and you roll that through. And when you make that embossing sandwich, it will not cut your die, it will just emboss it into the page. And that's what I want, because this is basically just a guide for me. So then when I take that off, you're going to see that Christmas tree has been embossed right down into the page. The other thing this embossing does is it shows me exactly where the small tree is, and I actually want to remove that from the page. So I'm using my little detail scissors. I'm not actually cutting this fast. This is the magic of video editing, but just get that little tree out there. Cut on the line, but it doesn't have to be perfect. One way you can decorate the outer ring is by using the frame edge that comes with the die set, but another way is just to use pattern paper. So I've got this little 6x6 pattern paper pad, and it had 2 sheets of this joy wreath, and I just happened to notice that that was the exact size of the ring accordion. So all I've done is I've just lined up the die right over the top of that wreath, and then when that gets cut out, all I have to do is take my detail scissors, go in there and remove the inside circle, remove the side tab, and then I have a perfect little ring all decorated up and ready just to be glued right onto my page. Now one thing I did is I added some glossy accents to all the little berries on the piece. So I'm going to do that first, that way I can set that aside to dry while I'm doing some other things on my album. One of the decorator dies that comes included with the Ring Accordion is this nice little stitching die. So all I have to do to add the stitch marks to the page is just center it over the page, run it back through my die cutting machine, and it'll add those stitch marks. And then once the glossy accents is dry, I can add my pattern paper right to the front of that page. So next I'm going to show how I did this textured tree with all the decorations on it. And what I started with is a piece of core cardstock. So this is a Coordinations cardstock. It's called Whitewash. This particular one has white on the top and black as the core. It does come in lots of different combinations, and all of those will be very pretty. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to emboss both sides of this strip with my Damask embossing folder. Now, I recently was given this groove tool by Artsy. They asked me to give it a try and see what I thought. I must say I really like it. It comes like this. It comes with the tool itself and then 4 different tips for it. You just put some AA batteries in it, and it has 2 different speeds to spin those little tips. And I'm going to use the coarse sanding one first, but it also has a fine sanding, it has a sponge tip for inking, and then it has a brush for painting. I'm going to use it on high, and then I'm just going to run it right over the top of that embossed surface, and because that's a core cardstock, it will bring out all of that pretty color from underneath, which in this case was black. But like I said, you can get different combinations of core cardstocks. And then once I've sanded it to my liking, I'm going to pop that sanding tool off, and I'm going to put on instead the sponge tip that can be used for inking. And you just run it, I'm using it on high, and you run it over the top of your ink pad, and then you just run it over your project, and it'll transfer that ink, and it does such a beautiful job of just adding the ink really evenly. You know, you can put as much or as little as you want. You could combine colors if you wanted to. Lots of possibilities with this tool. And what I need for my project is the 4 different trees that come with the Christmas Trees Pop Stand die. And I just need to take my tweezers to get that little tree frame right out of the die. So my first step is going to be to turn that Christmas tree's frame around and just add my fine glue around the perimeter. And you see I'm kind of sticking closer to the inside edge rather than the outside, because the tree that's going on that is just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to go face down into that glue and just center the big tree that has the slot up the middle and get that glued right to the back of the tree. And then when I turn that around, you'll see that now I've got the frame around the inside tree. So taking a look at the page that I've already completed, you can see that there's glitter lines, and they're going through that big tree even underneath the little trees. So I want to get some decorations on these big trees before I complete the assembly. Now, my favorite thing to use of the glitter lines is the transparent ones, the transparent silver, because you can change the color of them using any kind of alcohol marker. So I'm back to my dark red Copic marker just to fill in some of those circles. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate a clear one and then the one with the dots that I've just added, and I'll just go back and forth all the way through that tree. And then my last little step is I just need to go in there and make my slot again. So I'll turn that around, use my little detail scissors, and cut away any part of those glitter lines that's over the top of the slot. The small trees are going to go in next, and you're going to start with the one that also has a slot. The notch at the bottom of the small tree gets into the slot on the big tree. Then you should be able to just pull the top of the small tree right into the slot. So basically you've got that small tree, it should swing pretty loosely right there in the slot. Now what you want to do is pivot that tree so that you're laying it flat and both the slots line up with each other. That way you can put the other small tree, get the notch in the bottom first, then you're going to fold down the triangle at the top of the tree, slide it right through both slots, and then back up on the other side. So that last tree actually goes through both of the other trees. And then you'll see that you've basically made an X with your small trees, and that will flatten for when you're mailing it, and then it'll just expand on its own. So now you're going to flatten it and then just use the same glitter lines to complete all the stripes. So that should be really easy because you can just line it up from one end to the other, lined up with the stripe below it, just cut it away from the small tree wherever it hits an edge. And then at the very end, take the detail scissors in there and just snip those little lines right in the center line, snip the glitter line so that they become two pieces in the center, and then they will easily expand and collapse. So adding the tree to the page is as easy as just pinching the two small trees closed so that the back trees will go through the hole on the page. I've added the glue to the page itself, just in that frame, which I could see really easily because it was embossed. Now I should have made sure I didn't put any glue at the trunk or the tip of the tree. I kind of forgot I have to pivot that, but so I'll just pivot it now to get it out of that glue. And then you just want to make sure that that tree can still pivot so you can see what it's doing there. So I've made my two outer pages, and now I want to make the center page where I can put my little William the elf. So I'm going to cut that out of red cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and sink in that stitching die at the same time and just cut it all in one pass. When that comes out, I can take the stitching die off, but I'm not going to take the rest of it out of the die just yet. Instead, I'm going to put a Post-it note in the center to protect it, and then I'm going to use the stencil feature that comes built into the die with some texture paste just to add some cool raised stitch lines to the outer frame. I need to set that aside to dry for a while, but once it is dry, I can go back to my groove tool again with that same green ink and just add a little color to the stitch lines. I cut another red cardstock page from the Ring Accordion and trimmed out all the inside and the tab. I just wanted to do that to kind of stiffen up that page so that it would be very similar in weight to the other two, because the other two had the pattern paper frames. Now normally with accordion assembly, you just bring one tab to the other and you attach them. But the Ring Accordion's a little different. If you get that a little crooked, it's not going to lay flat on the table. You have to make sure that the cut edge, the one at the bottom, lines up perfectly so that it will be flat on the table. So the way you do that is you close your second page like a book. So I'm just going to right over the top of the other one. Then I can add the adhesive on the little tab that's sticking out, fold it up and over and onto the back of the page. So doing it that way means that I can line up that bottom edge, and then when that sets up and I open it, you can see it's perfect. It just stands perfectly. Both of the edges are flat on the bottom of the table. Now I'm going to repeat that process. I turn that like a book. I line up that cut edge at the bottom and make sure that that is exactly lined up perfectly. I hold that in place. I'm going to add my glue to my little tab on the side, fold it up and over and onto the back of the page, and press it until it sets. The Ring Accordion is the only accordion that you really need to do this way, and it's just because it only has that one cut edge to be the bottom of the album. I used the Merry and Bright clear stamps, one of the circle dies that comes with the ring, and one of the ornament tops that come with the ring to make that little season's greeting ornament. Just tied a little twine bow at the top, and I'm going to just place that right there on page 2. Once William the Elf is glued on, now I'm ready for final assembly. So the little tab on page 1 is going to come across and attach to page 2. So I'm going to need some glue on that tab. And now I could just bring it across, but once again, you're talking about a circle next to a circle with a small tab. So the best way to do it is actually to close the album up so that that tab hits where it's going to hit in the closed position. That way you know for sure that those bottom cut edges are still lined up perfectly. Then when you open it up, you haven't messed up, your perfect table display. Those two come across and attach behind the last two pages in the same exact manner. And then now what you've got is you've got that cool little ring accordion. So you've got the outer pages zigzagging one way and the inner pages zigzagging the other. When the card is closed, that first tree will pivot to the front of the album, and I decided to decorate the front of the album with another one of the red frames with the texture paste stitch lines. Now, one thing I wasn't crazy about was seeing that little ear of William when the album was closed. So my way of disguising that was to add an Agatha flourish to the outer ring on the front of the album. It kind of obscures the ear in the closed position. When you open it, you will see a little bit of that flourish inside the album. So my way to make that just a little bit more stable was to add the other half of that flourish. So when you cut one of those flourishes, you get mirror images on each side, so that I can just glue that right to the other side. And then I just repeated that overhanging flourish on the final page as well. Okay, here is the finished album. When you open it up, those trees are going to expand. It's really great. It gives a lot of dimension when it sits on the table. You're really going to enjoy having that extra dimension. When it closes up, they get nice and flat. That's just under 5 inches in diameter, and so you can definitely mail that in a 5x7 A7 envelope, probably for a single stamp. You can go to Elizabeth Craft Designs for more information on these dies. Full clickable supply links are in the About section below this video. You can go to Karen Burniston Designer on Facebook and like the page, where you will be treated to daily inspiration. And you can always find more ideas on my blog, KarenBurniston.com. Thanks for watching.